and welcome to Ag PhD. I'm Darren Hefty.
And I'm Darren Hefty. Thanks for joining us today. We're going to be talking about spray adjuvants and drift additives that you may add to your spray tank to try to fix some of the problems that we're facing out on the farm. How much will it improve performance? We'll talk about it today.
Over the last few years, we've had the good fortune to be able to talk to many of the highest yielding soybean farmers from around the country. We have some of their tips for you if you're looking for high yields.
We've also got a tough to control weed of the week. We'll show you how to control this weed later in the show. But first, here's our Farm Basics.
Farm Basics is brought to you by the Liberty Link trait and Liberty herbicide from Bayer. The most reliable weed management solution, Liberty Link and Liberty herbicide are the link to efficient row crop production and sustainable weed management.
During our Farm Basics time today, we're going to talk about one of the apps that Darren and I have been involved with the development in. It is the Ag PhD Field Guide app.
We get questions all the time about, hey, I heard this weed on your Weed of the Week segment, but what about this other one? I'm having trouble with that. What would you do on that particular weed? So we wanted to have a spot where you could go to look at some of the most common weeds out there and see what Brian and I would recommend to get it under control on your farm.
So not only do we have identification tips and photos, but we have our recommendations, our best recommendations for control in corn, in soybeans, and in wheat.
The other thing that we do on the Ag PhD Field Guide app is we look at some certain bugs. Now there are a number of different insects out there that we're trying to fight. We've got some of the common ones here. You can look at what we do to fight those as well.
To develop this app, we worked in conjunction with FMC, and they also have their hatch track information in there, which is great. You can find our Ag PhD daily radio updates on there. There's a lot of great stuff for you on the Ag PhD Field Guide app.
And of course, the app is free. It's a free download for you on your phone or tablet. We'd recommend you do that today because it will solve a lot of these issues, like our Weed of the Week, for example.
So once again, if you're looking for great information on weed control, on insect control, if you're looking for FMC's hatch track information, for the Ag PhD radio updates, that's all in one spot on the Ag PhD Field Guide app.
And while you're on there, you can find our Weed of the Week. We'll show you what will control it coming up later in the show.
Corn uses 75% of its nitrogen after V10. Investing all of your nitrogen budget before the crop is planted means you can't react to the changes in nitrate levels due to mineralization, rainfall, and temperatures. Split application using the 360Y drop boosts nitrogen efficiency and often yields. In seasons with strong mineralization, you can save input costs by reducing applied N. In wet years, replace lost N and hit your yield goal. Learn more at 360yieldcenter.com.
Introducing the SoilMax ZD48, the newest addition to the SoilMax Gold Digger lineup. The first plow designed for smaller class tractors, the ZD48 has been tested on tractors weighing between 10,000 and 16,000 pounds with excellent results. Designed for row crop farms, vineyards, irrigation, and specialty crop farms. The SoilMax ZD48 will install tile up to 48 inches deep, as well as install 3 or 4-inch tile. The ZD48 truly opens up the world of tile installation to more farms than ever before.
Everything in here has been exactly what they said it was going to be. I just wouldn't build anything but a mortar.
When the crew showed up, the building went up in seemed like days.
The process couldn't have been easier. There was no "I'll need to get back with you." It was instantaneous.
From beginning to end, the job is well done. The building is excellent and highly recommend Morton Buildings.
Now's the time to save during Building Value Days. Find the building of your dreams at mortonbuildings.com.
In life, when you put the max in, you get the max out. It's no different for your corn, which is why 40 years of effort have gone into proving that Instinct and N-Serve nitrogen stabilizers do more than just stabilize nitrogen, they maximize nitrogen, so your corn gives you the max in return.
As weed resistance becomes more of a problem across the country, your crop protection program needs to stay flexible to be effective. Hypro Innovative Spray Technology's wide selection of spray tips and nozzle configurations are available to keep your crop protection program right on technology, right on target.
How do you get the highest yielding soybeans possible? Well, today we've got some tips that we've learned from some of the top yielding soybean farmers in the country.
You know, there are a lot of things that can be done to soybeans, and for many farmers that are raising corn and soybeans, corn gets all the focus. Corn gets the fertility, corn gets the extra management, when in reality, soybeans can provide a great return on many of these input investments throughout the season.
So one of the things that I think a lot of these high yield soybean farmers have in common is they do have good fertility levels in their soil. They're fertilizing the plant, and sometimes it's through a number of different ways. So for example, they're going to look at their soil tests first, and then potassium is a big deal. Micronutrients are a big deal. Sulfur is a big deal. You got to look at the whole package and not just load up on one nutrient. A lot of people talk about, oh, you have to have good phosphorus levels. Yeah, you do. But you really have to have good potassium levels and all these other things to go along with it. And then the other key is doing some plant tissue analysis throughout the growing season. So many of these high yield farmers are tissue testing all through the season, but we believe it's most important to take a look at it just prior to flowering and all the way through flowering. But certainly look at it all through the year and just make adjustments if needed in your soybean fertility plan.
Now, this isn't saying that if you don't have the greatest fertility, you can't shoot for high yields. You certainly can, but you really have to watch it close as you're going through the season and be willing to make multiple applications through the season to feed your plant. So yes, the fertility buildup is a good thing. The other thing to keep in mind too is if you're already raising 60, 70, 80 bushel beans, look at how many nutrients that crop removes. Download the free Ag PhD fertility removal app and look at what your soybean yield level is taking out of the soil and make sure you're replacing those nutrients each year.
So one of the most encouraging things is seeing some of the really high yields come out around the country. There have been many farmers that have been at 100 bushels per acre. There are some going to 120. There are a few that have gotten 140 or even 150 bushel soybeans. And this is not to say, oh, we all should be raising that. This is just to show you that, you know what, today's genetics allow us to get there. I think a lot of people fall under the trap, and this is one of the things that the high yield soybean guys tell us, is people think, oh, the best the genetics can do is 80 bushels or 90 bushels. No, the genetics today can do a tremendous amount more. It's all in how we're going to manage that crop.
There sure have been some high yields set. In fact, the world record was broken in 2016, 171 bushel soybeans. Fantastic. Lots of potential there. It starts with a good fertility program and then a good seed treatment program. It makes a huge difference many years when you look at the fungicide package, protecting from bugs, and even some of the biologicals that are on the market now that are proven. There can be a big difference between seed that's treated and seed that's not.
Probably the top two things I would say, as we've talked to many of these high yield farmers, is number one, micronutrients, and number two, biological products. Those are the two areas that we see the high yield guys pretty much all doing that and the average farmer not doing that. So I'd be taking a look at things like copper and boron, zinc, iron, manganese, all super important. Then on the biological side, try some new stuff. That's basically what a lot of these high yield guys are doing. They got a bunch of little plots on their farm. They're trying this crazy thing and that crazy thing, this biological deal over there. Yeah, it's not all gonna hit, but you know what? They're identifying some things that do work for them on their farms, and then that just gives them that extra 5, 10, 15 bushel boost by the time they stack up a bunch of things. And all of a sudden, yep, they invested more money, don't get me wrong, but they're a lot more profitable, because if you can gain 15 bushels and you only spent the equivalent of 3 to 5 bushels of soybeans, well, you're many, many more dollars ahead.
Brian, they do, the higher yielding farmers versus the average guy, they do some of the very same things. They just do them at different times, and timing is so critical. We talk about it a lot when we look at weed control. You've got to hit them when they're just a couple inches tall, when you can still get them under control. You can't let them bolt up and be 8, 10 inches tall. It's tough to stop those. Insects. When you see those insect populations starting to expand, you got to get after it quick. You can't wait until the whole field is infested before you spray. So the timing of all these things is big, and it doesn't cost any more to do it this way. You just have to get out and scout on a regular basis and be on top of it.
All right, Darren mentioned scouting. That is definitely a difference between a lot of the high yield guys. They're scouting more often. The other thing is they're treating later in the year, and we've even adopted that on our own farm, starting to treat later with fungicides. So in the past, we've done a lot of R1 to R2, some R3 stuff, but they're going all the way to R5, maybe even R6, just handling the last diseases. Remember, with soybeans, they set so much of the yield really late in the year, so keep that soybean plant free from weeds, insects, diseases, even late in the year, and it should pay off.
Well, there's certainly a lot of things that can be done to improve your soybean yields. One of them, of course, is controlling our weed of the week. Can you identify this week's weed?
When you think about it, productivity starts at planting. So it's time to rethink how productive your planter can be. We did with the new Case IH 2000 series early riser planter. We rethought your row unit so it's tougher, more accurate. We rethought your meter, took the most precise technology, factory installed it. We rethought every inch of the Case IH early riser planter to make it the most productive planter around. And if you think about it, that's exactly what you want.
We've been growing Liberty Link soybeans for a good consistent 7 years, and we do a corn-soybean rotation and also kind of rotate chemistries between non-GMO soybeans and using the Liberty Link system. We've got mare's tail, we've got giant ragweeds. Early on in the season, we had a good start, put down some residual chemicals and had a good clean field and had a lot of rain before we got planted. So we had a lot of weeds show up and had a few more mare's tail show up than normal. With our other systems, we weren't able to gain the control on the mare's tail, especially the Liberty Link. We were able to go in there after planting, get rid of the mare's tail, had no problems. When you don't have the weed pressure, it does a nice job feeding into the machine and goes through nice, and you do a better job threshing and get to keep more of your crop.
A farmer's attention to detail is what makes the difference. You take the time for service management because you know how vital it is to your operation. You service your field like everything else because soil sampling makes all the difference and gets the results you want. Download the app Soil Test Pro and start grid sampling today. Keep your farm growing strong. The more you test, the more you know.
There are trillions of hardworking microbes right beneath your feet. Today, Monsanto BioAg is harnessing the power of microbes, creating microscopic farmhands that help plants access nutrients, enhance root and shoot growth, and handle stressful conditions throughout the season, protecting and maximizing your yield potential. We're turning 500 trillion microbes into 500 trillion new farmhands, ready for work. Nature, it's powerful technology.
Leading the charge in strip tillage for more than a decade, the Soil Warrior brings the future to your farm today.
When it comes to drift retardants and just in general spray adjuvants anymore, it seems like every company's got a whole mix of products you could use. And boy, if every company's got a bunch of different things, you add those all up, I mean, it's literally thousands of products you have to choose from. Well, how are you going to figure out what to do? We get more questions about these types of products than almost anything else, and half the time it's names we've never even heard of. So we want to talk today about separating those things. What do you need? What do you not need?
Well, I think it's important to put them into categories. You can say, oh, is it a crop oil? Is it a non-ionic surfactant? Is it a drift retardant? What is it going to be? That way you can start to, even if you don't know what all the names are in that category, you can start putting things into a situation where you can evaluate them.
All right, the first thing that I wanted to cover is drift retardants. There are a lot of people talking about reducing drift, reducing volatility, and those are good things to do. Well, what do you do with these drift retardants when there are so many of them out there? One of the things we like is the HPG polymer. Now, there are old polyacrylamide products. There are also some lecithin products that aren't too bad, but that HPG polymer, that's probably our favorite. There are a number of these different products out there. Our biggest suggestion to you, though, is start small. Start with a low rate and then maybe work your way up. Because if you use too much of almost any drift retardant, it can become a problem for you in your spray tank, in your pump, and that's the last thing you want to have happen, because if that ends up getting out of your nozzle, well, hopefully it at least gets out of your nozzle, but if it does, you might be changing the pattern of your sprayer. And all of a sudden you've got streaks going through your field, so just be really careful with these drift retardants. They're good products, but try to pick HPG polymers and then try to use low rates, building up a little bit from there once you've proven, oh, a low rate isn't going to cause me any problems.
And have realistic expectations. When you're using a drift retardant, that doesn't mean, hey, it's a 40-mile-an-hour wind, I can go out there and spray because I have this product in here that's going to keep it in my field.
Darren, even a 15 or 20-mile-an-hour wind, because some of these labels will say 15 miles an hour, you're fine to spray. We don't really believe that in a lot of cases. You have to be careful and look at what the downwind target is.
Also volatility. They're not going to stop volatility. So we're talking about physical drift here. So it's going to stop it from blowing a particle across. It's not going to stop something like an old 2,4-D formulation or an old dicamba formulation from picking up and moving after you spray.
All right, the next thing is to take a look at the label of the herbicide that you're using. That's not too tough. But what happens when you look at the label of 3 different herbicides that you're all throwing in the same tank together? That's where in a lot of cases you need a good agronomist. So even in our own situation, on our farm, we're taking a look at, hey, if the weather is cooler and drier, then maybe we need to switch over to something else. Well, maybe we need something to penetrate that leaf a little better, and then I'd say, all right, we got to step up to something that's got an oil in it. I usually try to keep this simple when we talk about spray adjuvants, and I'm only dealing with 3 things. From the liquid side, I'm dealing with MSO, crop oil, or non-ionic surfactant. The non-ionic surfactant's great for spreading and sticking. With methylated seed oil, that's almost at the extreme other end. Not only is it spreading and sticking, it's really getting burned, it's really penetrating through the leaf. Crop oil is a little bit in between, but crop oil also will help penetrate much faster. So the big thing to understand, non-ionic surfactants, just spreading and sticking. Crop oil, methylated seed oil are going to burn through a thick waxy cuticle and get you into some of the tougher weeds faster.
Here's the other key there that Brian mentioned, is just that you may need to switch adjuvants depending on the weather conditions. So when you're talking to your agronomist and he says, you know what, if it gets cold, we're going to switch to this, but if it's hot, we really like to use this one instead. I would suggest bringing both of them home. You can always return one of them later if you don't use it, and the adjuvants are really the smallest expense in the whole process here. Generally, whatever the main product you're spraying, in this case, likely a herbicide, is going to be the one that costs the most money. So have some extra adjuvant at home, and then understand, hey, if it's cool, I switch to this. If it's hot or if it's dry or whatever the weather condition is that you have to make a change, have both on hand so you can adjust on the fly.
The last thing I wanted to bring up is nitrogen source. There are some products that need a nitrogen source. Let's take Roundup, for example. We've always said use ammonium sulfate with Roundup. That's the cheapest way to get a good nitrogen source, as well as do some other things in that spray tank and help the Roundup performance. Okay, that's great. With some weeds, like water hemp, for example, somewhat nitrogen sensitive. So if you have ammonium sulfate, which has some nitrogen in there, together with Roundup, now you have better performance on that water hemp. So if the water hemp is small and you have ammonium sulfate in, you have a lot better chance to kill the weed. All right, but there are also some products that we really don't want ammonium sulfate. Ammonium sulfate can lower the pH a little bit. So I think about the old Accent, for example. We didn't usually like ammonium sulfate. We got better performance with straight liquid 28%. Just make sure you're getting a good spray grade 28% that's not all contaminated with dirt and everything else. But I guess the big thing here is when we start talking about Xtend beans, we really don't want ammonium sulfate in there at all, because what we've found, what researchers have found, I should say, is dicamba has more volatilization when it's put together with ammonium sulfate. So our recommendation now is anytime you're spraying any dicamba product, even a little bit in the tank mix, you've got to avoid ammonium sulfate.
So that's what you don't want in the tank mix with the new Xtend. There are new adjuvants being labeled, and some of them are still going to get labeled before spring. So if you're going to be spraying dicamba in your Extend soybeans, if you're going to be spraying the new 2,4-D in Enlist soybeans, as those things get labeled, look for new surfactants that are coming on the market. Make sure you're working with your agronomist on that.
Once again, I know it's tremendously confusing when you look at this whole thing with drift retardants, with spray adjuvants. We got new technologies out there. This agronomist recommends that agronomist recommends the other thing. I usually try to keep this thing pretty simple. We're not real big on drift retardants most of the time. I'd rather see you use the right spray nozzle. And then on the other side, I look at either non-ionic surfactant, crop oil, or methylated seed oil. And then I also may need a nitrogen source. But certainly, like Darren said, for some of these really new technologies like Extend or Enlist, there are special products for those. So make sure you talk to your agronomist about those.
And if you have our Weed of the Week, you're going to need every option available because it's a tough one to control. We'll show you how to stop it coming up next.
The Weed of the Week is sponsored by the Enlist Weed Control System from Dow AgroSciences, a new herbicide and trait system that will build on glyphosate.
Farming isn't just in the land, it's in you. Take control of weeds like never before. Enlist builds on the Roundup Ready system, combining proven control of a new 2,4-D and glyphosate in Enlist Duo herbicide. Protect what matters without changing the way you farm. Talk to your seed or crop protection supplier today.
Our Weed of the Week is yellow nutsedge. This is a tough one because it can reproduce by tubers in addition to seed.
Well, also it's tough because many people misidentify it as a grass. And if you look at it, it does kind of look like a grass at first, but it's not. It's a sedge, so it requires something completely different to get it under control.
Well, how do you tell if it's a sedge versus a grass?
Well, like you mentioned, Brian, you can pull it up and look at the root system underneath. That's a great identifying feature. The other thing with yellow nutsedge that's unique is it has a triangular stem. So when you feel it down at the base of the plant and you feel around that stem, it's three-sided. And you think, what? Oh, that isn't a big deal. But once you feel it, you'll realize, oh yeah, I've never felt another plant like this. That's pretty cool.
Okay, so if you've got a sedge, just a normal grass product isn't going to work, except for Dual. And Dual is a pretty good grass product that actually does have fairly decent activity on yellow nutsedge. So in many cases, that's the best option pre-emerge.
Well, one of them that doesn't work very well that a lot of people will try is Roundup. We spray Roundup on yellow nutsedge. It is a waxy leaf that doesn't have hair, and a lot of that Roundup just runs right off.
Oh, you say that though, Darren, but we've actually been able to make Roundup work okay on this particular weed if you spray it when it's small, you spray it when the weather's good, and use a low water volume, 3 to 5 gallons of water and the highest labeled rate of Roundup depending on your situation.
Right, so it's not like your normal, hey, I'm going to go spray a broad acre application here. I'm spraying a whole quarter and there happens to be a little patch of nutsedge and I just drive over it fast and blow stuff out there. No, you have to be really focused if you want to get it under control.
All right, the other products that work, Permit in corn or Basagran in soybeans. There's also the combination of Basagran and atrazine called Ladic that can get used in corn. So there aren't a whole lot of options to this thing, but here's the good news. We don't normally see this in well-drained areas, so make sure you're fixing the drainage, get good crop canopy, and generally speaking, your yellow nutsedge problem will go away.
One other note, that same active ingredient that's in Permit is in lawn and garden products too, so you do have options if you get it in your lawn grass.
Well, that's it for our Weed of the Week, but stay tuned. Iron Talk is coming up next.
For lower costs, higher production, Mandico Agri leads with versatility unmatched. Twister is the vertical tillage unit for no-till as well as conventional tillage. Avoid costly downtime with Twister's ease of maintenance. Its unique Coulter suspension allows it to follow the contour of the field yet remain forgiving in rocks. Our hydraulically adjustable Coulter angles mean you never leave the cab, making residue management easier, more efficient. Spring or fall, the Mandico Twister is the new leader. Check with your local dealer or visit mandicoagri.com.
One of the biggest yield limiting factors on farms is even crop emergence, and only one closing wheel will get your growing season started right. Furrow Cruiser spiked closing wheels from Copperhead Ag are proven to yield better than standard rubber tire and cast iron closing wheels in all conditions. With yield gains that give you a return on investment the first season, there's no reason to run a standard closing system again. Visit copperheadag.com today to get your 2017 growing season started right.
Sometimes getting the yield you want means you need a whole new game plan. Think about it. When the older conventional fertilizer you've been using goes head to head with tough soil conditions, they can get all tied up before they ever have a chance to score. That's when it's time to regroup. Time to send in the A-Team. AgroLiquid isn't like other fertilizers. Their nutrient-balanced products stay in the soil in the right formulations in just the right amounts. And because of AgroLiquid's unique chelation technology, you wind up using less and seeing more in your yields. So you could wind up having one heck of a championship season. Make a smart start with AgroLiquid. To find the closest nutrient coach near you, visit agroliquid.com.
No matter what crop you raise, you will definitely raise your expectations for your farm at Commodity Classic, America's largest farmer-led, farmer-focused convention and trade show. Education that will change the way you think about your farm. Innovators who are changing the game in agriculture. The new ideas, equipment, and technology you won't find at your local farm show. And conversations with thousands of America's best farmers just like you. So farmer up. Farmer up. Farmer up. Join thousands of your fellow farmers at the 2017 Commodity Classic, March 2nd through 4th in San Antonio.
Iron Talk is brought to you by Case IH.
The AFS Connect Farm Management System from Case IH connects you, and only you, to the information you need most from your equipment, from anywhere, at any time. AFS Connect, only from Case IH.
Planting corn in 2017 may be more fun than in the past. I'll explain in today's Iron Talk. Let's go back to the early 1990s for a minute. Liquid insecticide didn't mix well with starter fertilizer. It was a pain, so many farmers either stuck with dry boxes on the planter or gave up the starter fertilizer if they wanted to use liquid insecticide. Fortunately, Capture LFR came out with a formulation they termed Liquid Fertilizer Ready. Finally, the stars were aligned, so liquid insecticide and liquid starter fertilizer could be used together in the same tank, and life was good until...
Like last year on our farm, we did do headline in furrow and we gained like 6.5 bushels.
Let's face it, fungicide doesn't really like to mix with anything else. It was a hurdle that only adding a second tank would overcome. This year, the same folks who brought Capture LFR technology to the market found a way to make Headline and Capture into a couple different premixes that would not only mix together, but would mix well with liquid fertilizer. Manticore and Timetry are both premixes of Headline and Capture LFR that can do just that. Now, if you've already added the second tank to do all the things you need to do with liquids on the planter, this may not be a big deal for you. However, if you have one tank and 3 things to accomplish, planting should be a whole lot more fun with these new products for 2017. That's all for today's Iron Talk, and now back to the show.
Closed captioning for Ag PhD is sponsored by Norwood Sales.
On your farm, you need speed and year-round effectiveness in your tillage program. The Quick Till from Norwood Sales allows you to move quickly through your fields, maximizing time and improving yield. Constructed of heavy-duty materials, the Quick Till is ideal for both spring and fall applications, from preparing a healthy seedbed early in the season to breaking up corn residue after harvest. For more information about how a Quick Till can improve fields on your farm, call Norwood Sales today.
That's our time for today, but before we go, we want to invite you to tune into the Ag PhD radio show. It's on each weekday on SiriusXM Channel 147 at 2 p.m. Central.
Don't miss the next Ag PhD TV show. We'll have another Weed of the Week, Farm Basics, Iron Talk, and a whole lot more. I'm Darren Hefty.
And I'm Brian Hefty. Thanks for watching Ag PhD.
Soil is nature's filter to keep contaminants out of our water. As rain falls on soils and seeps down through, the minerals and microbial life in the soil remove and detoxify nutrients as well as inorganic materials. To learn how farmers manage soil and groundwater, visit the Responsible Nutrient Management Foundation at rnmf.org.